This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff C. Carter, and this week we're talking with Patrick Tumblety about his new book, Come Out and Play. Returning champion Patrick Tumblety is a writer of horror, science fiction, and poetry. He is also a multimedia artist, with work appearing in audio, photography, film, and television. He lives in Delaware with his wife and daughter, where he maintains a tenuous truce with the spiders. Welcome back to the show, Patrick.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Icebreaker question. Do you have the tattoo yet?
I don't have the tattoo yet. I wanted the tattoo. I just have not had the time to get it. The summer's been like crazy with taking my daughter to different camps and family stuff on the weekends and vacation. But it's coming. I have a feeling that once my work dies down and the fall gets here, then I'll get into Halloween spirit and go, I want all of my tattoos.
Just to recap, your vision for this first tattoo is...
I think when I talked to you last, I had my heart set on the Predator. No, what was it? Was it that or the pumpkin one?
Pumpkin one.
Oh, okay. So the pumpkin one is a definite. And I think that might be the one that I get in October. I'm going to be going full throttle, I think, on Halloween this year, especially with the book coming out that month. So that actually might be something that I do. I'm going to start a small TikTok campaign for the book. And that actually might be one of the TikTok things is to do me getting that tattoo.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in lieu of the typical getting to know you section, which we've covered in shows past, I thought we'd keep going with the updates. What is the status of the coffee table book?
Coffee table book is pretty much done. We're still working on some of the text. I'm officially kind of sending it out to people to draw up some attention to it. Hopefully find somebody who's willing to publish it. The coffee table book is called The October Children, which is kind of a play on my Halloween podcast. It's a collection of seasonal poetry and short stories, just like the audio podcast is. So even some of the ones that have been on there, I've translated to the book. And I kind of wanted it to be an all ages October Halloween celebration book that people can sit down to and you can have out during Halloween as a coffee table book, as something to show everybody or people could read through. And so I kind of came at it with this angle of a little bit creepy stories for kids, kind of like Goosebumps, but stuff for adults covering more of a nostalgic feel for Halloween, about what it was like to kind of have that Halloween spirit as a kid. And so I found an amazing artist. His name is Drew Roush. Drew's art style was just fantastic. It was really perfect for the mood and the vibe that I wanted.
Speaking of the October Children, can we look forward to another season?
I think so. The book is coming out in October, but I think once the August hits, the book's kind of out of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I really won't have much to do for that other than promote it. So I think I might actually do some synergy and kind of do both. Maybe I'll read the first chapter or something like that, and then do it. I was on the fence about it, I think, last time we talked, because I didn't know what there would be. But it's kind of like a wedding, right? Because it's you spend so much time planning for a wedding, but when it actually gets to a month before the wedding, there's nothing left to do. You just the wedding. So I'll have time to do it when it gets here. So I think I'm pretty much going to do it.
Awesome. Let's talk about your main project, your new book, Come Out and Play.
Come Out and Play is about a young man who is about to turn 18 years old, but he has been shut into his house voluntarily because about 6 months before his birthday, his mother was in a car accident that he believes he caused. He got into a big fight with her, and it caused the accident. So he's become a recluse and given up on a lot of things. The night of his 18th birthday, something tries to come into and infiltrate his house, and he believes that something has been sent for revenge, possibly by the ghost of his dead mother.
So this is your first novel?
This is my first fully published novel, yes.
What was it about this book that demanded your attention for your first full-length novel?
So this is a story that I've basically been writing my entire life. I've wanted to be a writer since I was 10. As I grew, this story kind of grew too. I always wanted to do something about my neighborhood, about my friends growing up, about that kind of feeling. Growing up, my two favorite movies were Home Alone, and my favorite game was Resident Evil, and that's how I pitched the book. It's Home Alone meets Resident Evil. And I just always wanted to do something in that vein. It wasn't until I got older that I started to realize that a lot of the reasons I got into horror and a lot of things that this book, or this story rather, was becoming, was a lot about growing up with undiagnosed mental illness, which is what I had as a kid. I had anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder since I was very young. At the time, not to age myself, but I didn't have Google when I was a kid, so I didn't know what was happening to me. I had a lot of intrusive thoughts. I had a lot of night terrors and fears, and all of these things that other kids didn't seem to have that I did. And it wasn't until I got much older that I realized that this wasn't a thing that was unique to myself, that other people had this. And so this idea of like this really fun, almost poltergeist-esque house invasion story started to become something a lot more meaningful to me, since it is based on me growing up with this. And so the more I learned about the illness that I had, the more the story became clear. And I think that once I became an adult, understood the nature of my fears as a child and my ability to heal from them, that's what the book finally became. And so for me, this is kind of like a project of kind of putting that part of my life to bed. But I love fiction, so I made it as fun as possible as well, because I love fiction and I love horror. So instead of just writing a memoir or a medical-esque book, I was like, no, I'm going to do it the way I like to do it. I'm going to make everything a metaphor and give it all I got. So that's why it was important to me to finish this story first, and I'm very proud of that.
It starts with this real brutal onslaught of intrusive thoughts, and then it gives way to these compulsive elements. And you can tell, okay, obviously, this character is so racked with guilt for what they believe is the death of their mother that they've just been shattered. They're unable to face their father, face the world, face their friends. And then once we look behind the curtain and we see what their life was like before the accident, you realize, oh no, this is a much deeper issue. This is not something that sprang up 6 months ago. This really is woven into this person's entire childhood. And I thought that was such a shocking reveal.
I appreciate that. It was a shocking reveal to me living it. And I think that's what I kind of wanted to put the audience through. Not to share in my grief, but to share in the experience of someone who has it. What I had in mind was, how can I make this both, a fictional story that builds up into a mystery, but how can I also make this into the point of view where this is a real thing? Like, the horror of this book is that this is a real illness. So basically what I did is I just pretended that I didn't have it and started writing the character as though he didn't know he had something, but maybe other people around him knew that he was a little different or things like that. As he starts to discover, just like as you said, as he starts to discover things about his family and his past that he didn't know, he realizes that the things that are haunting him aren't manifestations of a supernatural thing. It's like, oh no, this has been going on my entire life. This has been in my head. Maybe something is wrong with me. Even if you have never heard of a mental illness like this, one of the challenges I had was, there's always that joke like, oh, I have OCD. That means I like to clean a lot. That's not really what it means. Cleaning is a very tiny 1% byproduct of the rituals that you can go through. So for people who don't know what the illness is, you don't need to know. You're going to be in the main character's shoes, discovering the nature of it. And so that's why I wanted to approach it. I wanted to keep in mind somebody who doesn't know what it is, or somebody who might have it, who now knows someone, at least an author maybe, who recognizes it. Books for me were always catharsis growing up, and certain things that I found in books, I related to and didn't know other people had until I read them in other books. And this illness, other than reading a medical book or of someone's memoir of having the illness, I never see it. I see everything from paranoia to schizophrenia in horror, but I never see this kind of illness. So I kind of came from it. The way I discovered it in myself is the way the main character discovers it.
Another interesting choice is that the book is in present tense. So I want to hear your thoughts on why you chose that modality.
Two reasons. On the technical side of things, I feel very comfortable writing in present tense. I think it's from my video game love, growing up with video games, because you're always, well, not always, but 90% of the time, you're supposed to imagine yourself as the main character. It's not I or an internal monologue to certain to a character, but it's almost like you in proxy. And so even though we were dealing with a person who narrates the whole thing in a way, like we're seeing through their eyes. I didn't want it to be I statements. I wanted it to be more of a look at this person's life through their eyes, not in their head. And I think because since this main character doesn't really know their own head anyway, and he has intrusive thoughts, and I wanted to experience it that way instead of him just justifying it in his head. I kind of wanted to give it more of a bird's eye view, like I said, in very video game-esque knowledge, where we can see him and what's going on around him, but we're not locked into his head because he is already off the bat an unreliable narrator. So that's kind of why I wanted it to be in that tense, so that we can see what he's seeing, but not be beholden to his own thoughts.
Did you do any drafts or experiments along the way with strict first person or strict second person POV?
I rewrote the book 3 times in different tenses. I wrote it in third person, I wrote it in first person, and I finally settled on this tense because it was as close as we could get to the main character without always being on top of him. I also thought, and this might go into a little spoiler territory, I thought the implications of what comes from the nature of what's going on, I think you probably know, but I thought was really interesting because there are many voices that end up being inside of this boy's head. I thought it was cool to play on that idea of intrusive voice and his actual voice, but also us seeing what he's happy to. I just love the idea of this kaleidoscope of eyes on him, including the readers.
Would it be a spoiler to say that you play with vampire mythology in this story?
Oh, not at all. That was one of the main ingredients that molded the whole crux of this story.
It's a take on the vampire mythos that I've never seen, so kudos.
What I love about that idea was I didn't want it to be a vampire story. At one point it was, years ago, because I love vampire stories. But I thought that was too easy. When the horror of the story started to become apparent to me that it was this real life illness that we're really talking about, then I started to really dig into the reality of it more. I think something that is more akin to possibility is scarier than just straight up fiction. I also am really into folklore. And so the idea of having an affliction that becomes almost mythological in the person who has it really interests me. Because from my point of view at the time, when I was a kid and I had intrusive thoughts, I had no idea what it was. I mean, obviously it's me and obviously it's coming from my head, but what does this mean? Why can't I stop it? And what's happening? And do I really think that like walking under a ladder is going to kill my mom? But well, no, I don't think that. Yet I am compelled to always walk around it. Why is that? Why do I feel uncomfortable? So like that became a mythology. I actually build mythologies to keep myself going in life because of this mental illness. So the idea of drawing on a fictional mythology to understand the actual physical illness to me was very interesting.
Vampires in particular have this idea of obsessive compulsion built into the foundation. There are so many different vampires from so many different cultures that have this OCD weakness. Not only is there a compulsion where they are compelled by their thirst and they compel other people to obey, but also there's the old trick where you can throw a pile of sunflower seeds on the ground or something like that, and they will be compelled to count them until the sun comes up.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things which I put in the book because it's ridiculous. You know, as somebody who has that disease, it's ridiculous that that's a thing. But it's a thing. It's part of the mental illness that is OCD. So the idea that vampires, right, one of the most known mythologies in the entire world, kind of has its roots in a actual psychological phenomena is kind of amazing to me. I think that that's why we love stories, right? Everything that's real ends up as a mythology. I mean, that's just the way that stories are told.
Last time you talked about your yearning for transformative horror. This feels like your thesis statement about the speculative and aspirational genre of transformative horror.
You know, I think you're right. I actually think that that's a better answer than what I gave before about why this book, like why this story I wanted to do, because I feel like this distills exactly every aspect of writing that I would like to accomplish with my writing career. I feel like this story distills every single metaphor and reality of what I'm trying to say not just as a fiction writer, but as somebody who has stories to tell in reality. I feel like this is the meeting of both of those worlds, and this story kind of tells it perfectly. It gives me pause sometimes because I feel like this represents that side of me so much that I'm like, well, how do I top that? How do I write the next thing? But I'm working on that.
So we are T-minus 100 days to Halloween. We're already into spooky season.
We're there.
Do you know yet what your plans are going to be beyond your creative output?
No, beyond the creative output, I don't. I'm sure a lot of that's going to be based on what my 7-year-old wants to do. And our traditions, the usual pumpkin carving and haunted houses. I do want to make it more of a point to go a little further than usual to do some of the haunted house stuff. Because now that my daughter's a little older, she can hang out with my parents and her grandparents. So I want to go out to kind of reaches of Pennsylvania and go to all of the really good haunted house Halloween hayride stuff. The ones I have never been to.
I was in Delaware a week ago. When we were driving back out, I saw a giant skull on a barn, and
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Are you serious? Because my house is right next to it.
Really?
In fact, I moved down the street, but from my townhouse that I lived in a couple of years ago, you could see it from my house. Yes. I would have stopped by and be like, "Hi, Jeff," on the side of the road. Yeah, I'm on that road, literally.
And I saw that there is a Sea Witch Festival in Rehoboth.
The Sea Witch Festival, I think, is actually really old. I think that's actually a tradition here. I was there back when we first moved, just to kind of check it out. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of crafty things. It's just a really nice vibe. The vibe you would think a Sea Witch gathering would be is exactly the vibe you get.
Well, I'm glad you're getting back out there.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I still think my daughter's a little too young. She'll be a little too scared, but I'm waiting for that day where she's like, all right, let's do it.
You weren't quite sure what the next project is because you have somebody that's right about to roll off the production line. Can I pitch Sea Witch? Sea Witch versus Puckwudgies? What do you think?
I mean, look, I'm all for a good cryptid fight. Absolutely. That's my wheelbarrow there. I mean, if we could pitch Mothman versus Bigfoot, that would be awesome. But right now, I'm actually deep into working on my second novel. So I'm hopefully, now that everything with the first book is done, hopefully I'll be able to just concentrate on that now that things have kind of died down. So I'm really excited about that. In the last year or two, a couple things have happened that are kind of other aspects of my past I've kind of been confronted with. And I'm like, that would be a good story. So... Oh, that's unmarked trauma. There you go. So I did think of something that I really thought would be a wonderful idea, and I've been having a lot of fun with it so far. So I'm pretty confident that other than the short stories that I still write, this is going to be my next actual novel piece.
Awesome. Where can our listeners find you online?
I'm most active on Twitter. It's at Peak37PT, PEAK 37PT. That's where I mostly interact. But I do have a website. If you just search my name, it's a Wix website, WIX. It's a long title because I didn't add a unique URL. So it's just speakerpatrick@wixsite.com. So just search my name, Patrick Tumblety. If you have the means to follow Uncomfortably Dark on Patreon, because not only did they publish the book, but I've been doing a lot of stuff for them, a lot of writing, flash fiction, a lot of personal essays and things like that, kind of just documenting the process. And they're also just a really great group of writers and people. So if you're a horror fan, I would actually encourage you to do that because I think there's some really great stuff coming out of that. I think there's just a lot more to come. This is their first year, and I think they're really doing great. I would say try to follow me through them because that's where a lot of my writing is ending up. If anybody reads my stuff and they like the more realistic, the mental health side of it, I do a lot of short stories about my mental health on medium.com, which is all under just my name. Some of it's autobiographical, some of it's fiction, but still dealing with things like that. Follow me there.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming back. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I love just chatting with you.
Please subscribe and follow. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.